Good afternoon and good evening to some of you, depending on what part of the country you're in. This is Wayne Potter from Giotto, and we are pleased to bring you a webinar tonight on sublimating ceramic mugs. And of course, we all know what a mug is. It's a drinking device with a handle on it, and it's very, very popular this time of the year because it's a great Christmas item. So I guess at that, I want to turn it over to Jimmy Lamb, who is with Sawgrass, and he's going to conduct the webinar. I'll be here the whole time and certainly can answer questions at the end. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, well, thanks, Wayne. Glad to be here. And as Wayne's talking about, we're going to be chatting about ceramic mugs. Now, a lot of you might know that, my background, actually, I started out in the world of embroidery. So, I used not to get excited about mugs. And, actually, mugs have so much potential, just like Wayne said, this time of the year, because they fit the bill for a great gift, whether it's a corporate gift, whether it's a personalized gift, whether it's for a special occasion. A ceramic mug is an ideal type of product to be able to sell to your customers for them to use for whatever purpose they need. The other neat thing about a ceramic mug is there's really almost no other way to really accurately decorate a mug other than with sublimation. Some of these other types of processes that people try to put images on mugs, if it's an ink process, it's just putting a layer of graphics on the surface. It can scratch and peel and eventually wears off. But, sublimation doesn't do that. So, it's the ultimate way to actually decorate the mug. So let's get started here on our subject. And as I was saying, sublimated mugs are a real top seller out there. And they just have so much potential because they appeal to virtually every segment of every market. And I don't care who your customer is. You can put a mug in front of them and you can sell them a mug. And they're so simple to produce. I mean, they're really simple to be able to get it out there, make it look good, and make a little bit of money off of it. But then you start thinking about all the things you can do with it, because too many times we don't give a mug the justice it's due. And what I mean by that is we look at a mug as something we put a logo on and sell it. But think about all the different purposes of a mug. And I got some different images here, and you can see we have a personalized gift over here, which is it's great, this time of the year. We start talking about things like spirit products, for the schools and different sports teams. Of course, we can always do it as a logoed item, meaning it's really a promotional product. And when we start talking about the Christmas season, promotional products go hand in hand because a lot of our corporate clients are giving gifts to their clients as a show of appreciation during the holiday season. Now, that doesn't mean he has to have a Christmas theme at all, because during the holiday season, it's traditionally all about gift giving. So it's not like we have to put, images of Christmas trees on there. We're talking about just putting your logo on there and then giving that to a client is a wonderful way to say, hey, thanks for being a customer this year. And then it becomes a great promotional product because the client's probably going to use it. And that's a really important aspect in the world of promotional products. Will the person who receives it actually use it? Because in the case of a mug, if someone's using that, other people see the logo. If you look at an ink pen, what you see as a lot of promotional products that are given out, who knows what's on an ink pen because it's in someone's hand and you can't read the logo. A mug, on the other hand, really gets the message out there. So these are just some of those selling points when you're talking to your clients about some of the products that they should be investing in during this holiday season. Now, I'd like to get a little bit deeper, too, because mugs, when we start talking about gifts, they become the gift all by itself or perhaps part of a gift ensemble, okay? For example, if you look at the mug here with Nicole on there, and now we've packaged it up with some other things, like we have the Ghirardelli hot cocoa mix in there. And this is something that can be put into maybe a gift basket, so it becomes part of a nice gift grouping instead of just a mug by itself. And this is something that you may want to talk to some of your clients if you have, for example, gift shops, retailers that are selling gift products. They may take this and package it with some other things. That's a really nice way to do it. Same thing with some of your corporate clients. For their, basic customers, maybe they just give them a mug. For their really important customers, they give them a mug that's equipped with some of the other accessories in there. You can see another great example over here with the Grandma and Company. So there's lots of different ways that we can position the mugs out there to get people excited about the product. And that, in turn, is going to generate more revenue from you. So how hard is it to do a mug? Well, it's a staple of sublimation. A lot of you may have already done it. Some of you may be considering it. It's definitely not something you're going to put under your flat press. So you're going to have some extra tools if you want to do mugs, but luckily they're readily available from Giotto paper. So let's just kind of walk through the process here, because if you're used to doing flat stuff, now you're going to do something round. It is a little bit different. So with everything else that we do with sublimation, the first step, of course, is creating the image. And we need to be able to create an image that's going to fit on the mug. And you want to take that into consideration because it's going to go around from the handle all the way back to the other side of the handle. So you're going to need to be able to measure that distance from handle all the way around to handle, as well as the heights of the mug too. Now, a lot of the mug companies will offer a template that will help you position your artwork. But if not, it's not really a big deal because we're going to make something rectangular in nature and extend it from handle to handle. So you want to set that up and print it out on your sublimation printer. Something like the Ricoh 3110, which is an ideal printer for doing mugs because of the speed and the accuracy of the images that come out of it. Okay, once we get that out, typically our image is going to be a lot smaller than the paper because the image has to fit that mug. So the next concept here is that we do need to trim the transfer paper. Now, if you're doing like a t-shirt, you don't need to trim the paper per se because you got plenty of room. You're using big flat press and you don't have any parameters to worry about. In fact, most of the flat things that we sublimate, we're just going to take that sheet of paper and lay it on there and sublimate it, unless it's something smaller. In the case of a mug, though, we're very limited in how the paper can fit around the mug because of that handle, amongst other things. So we need to trim that paper down. You can see that being done right here, trimming it down so that we have it right to the edges of the image itself. Now, once we do that, we want to attach some heat tape to each end of the transfer so that we're able to secure it to the mug and help hold it in place. This is very critical that our sublimation transfer does not slip or reposition itself while we're setting up the production. So the heat tape is an important aspect here. Now we can place the mug in the center of the transfer paper. Take a quick look, make sure everything's lined up. And that's one of the nice things when we're doing mugs because we have a good, clear view of the graphic and of the field of that graphic such that we can line things up the right way. So we have it in the center, and then that allows us to line it up such that we can attach the tape. And you can see here we pull up one side and we tape it, and then we can pull up the other side and we can tape it. And it needs to be tight. It's a very important aspect here. Get it tight and then press it down firmly so that that heat tape takes hold. Now the next aspect is some type of blowout sheet. And the most common blowout material used with mugs is Teflon. Now you can't use that big sheet of Teflon that came with your flat press because it's going to get in the way. So if you're going to use Teflon, you're going to have to trim it down such that it's going to fit with the mug the right way. So keep that in mind. You may actually have to go out and buy some additional Teflon because you may not want to cut up the piece that you've been using with your flat press. So we're going to wrap the Teflon around as well. And then we're going to go to the press. Now we're going to position this mug carefully into that press. And presses typically have an adjustment on them so they can handle different size diameter mugs. In addition, you can do other things besides just mugs. There are some water bottles that will fit in there. There's some different travel mugs that will fit in there. It really comes down to what's the diameter of the item you want to sublimate versus the achievable diameter of that particular mug press. But the key is we got to get it in there. We want to make sure that the transfer does not slip as we're putting it in there. The Teflon, it doesn't have to be secured because the Teflon, if it slips a little bit, it's not going to hurt anything, but the transfer slipping could be a problem. So we're going to get in there, we want to tighten it down, lock it in place, and then we're going to go set up the settings for that particular heat press. Now this is important that you read the instructions. If you're a guy like me, you tend to read the instructions after you mess something up. Here you want to do it before you mess something up. Hopefully not mess anything up. But you want to look at the instructions. The instructions that come with the heat press will clearly tell you what the recommended settings are. And those may vary with some of the different mugs. So when you're actually getting your mug, see if there's any recommended settings for that mug, and then look at your settings for the heat press to help you determine what is the proper setup for your situation. Well, once we set that all up, we're going to run that through. And we're going to make sure that all our settings have been done correctly. And you're going to find some variances here. What I'm showing you is the standard production settings. Do not write these down, okay? Because depending on the press that you buy, you may be setting these things differently. I'm just referring to what the standards are out there. That's why it's important that you go and read the instructions, because we have heat presses for mugs that are actually using less than 400 degrees. So you want to make sure your setting is right, and we'll talk a little bit more about a specific mug press here in a few minutes when we bring Wayne back in. Same thing with your time. With the digital presses that Giotto offers, you're looking at upwards to about 3 minutes potentially to be able to do a mug, which isn't a bad press time. You know, when you're doing things like ceramics are heat sinks, and they really absorb the heat that you apply to it. And that's why we typically have to run them for a longer period of time, because it's almost like a sponge as far as the heat, pulling that heat in. So we've got to keep applying the heat to keep it a constant temperature against the surface. Well, once we're done, we're going to remove the paper. Now, there's a couple of little no-nos happening here. You can imagine this picture here was taken for purposes of the presentation. You're not going to be grabbing that mug when it comes out of the press barehanded, okay? And you do want to get that paper off while it's hot. This is not a cold peel process. It's a hot peel process. So you do need to get the paper off, and you're not going to grab that handle. Well, you may one time. But this handle is going to be very hot along with the entire mug. So you're probably using an oven mitt. And so I know people like to laugh at my picture and say, yeah, was that you? No, actually it wasn't. Do you see the smoke coming off his fingers? Anyway, you want to position it carefully, remove the paper. And then what a lot of people do, and there are some different opinions on this, but a lot of people will take a container of water at room temperature, not ice water, room temperature, and then dip the mug in. And the reason for this is, being that a mug is ceramic and it's absorbing the heat, it maintains that heat for a long period of time as well. Thus, it's still gassing after we pull the paper off. And by dipping in the water, it will not smear the sublimation, but it will cause the mug to cool down enough that the sublimation process stops. Again, you can see barehanded someone dipping it in the water. That's not the way you're going to do it, because that thing is still pretty darn hot. Well, once we're done and pull that out, we've got a beautiful mug there. And being that it's sublimated, you're not going to be able to scratch that thing. The only way you're going to scratch is get a chainsaw out, or maybe a hammer and chisel, and gouge it. But it doesn't scratch, and it stands up to the heat of whatever's put in there. Looks good, lasts a long time, and that's what makes it a very important type of product. Well, what about challenges to mugs? Mugs are pretty simple. Like everything else, there's a few challenges. Perhaps the most notable challenge with a mug is what we call a gas out. And a gas out is when the paper is not firmly against the surface, such that during the sublimation process, some of the gas slips out through maybe a crease in that paper, and you can see exactly what happened here on that mug with that little strip there under nation. That's gassing out, and you can't fix that once it's done. So that's your biggest challenge of all, is making sure that your paper is firmly against that surface when we lock down that mug press, so that we can prevent that from happening. And other than that, mugs are pretty straightforward. That's the number one issue that we see out there. Another thing to be aware of, we get asked this a lot, are sublimated mugs dishwasher safe? Well, keep in mind that if the dishwasher actually gets up to the 400-degree range, it's probably going to affect the sublimation. But most home dishwashers don't get anywhere close to 400 degrees. Okay, so you're probably not going to have any problems with dishwashers. There are some potential situations, possibly, with a commercial operation. Again, it depends on how hot their dishwasher is getting, like, say, in a restaurant. And I don't think that many of them get up to 400 degrees. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're getting anywhere close to 400 degrees. So for the most part, it shouldn't be an issue with affecting the sublimation when it goes to a dishwasher. Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about mug solutions, because it's going to take a little bit of equipment to get the job done, right. And if Wayne, if you want to join us back in here,
Sure, Jimmy.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the equipment, because I know you have some really nice packages that have been put together to be able to get a professional job when doing sublimation on mugs, starting with that Ricoh 3110 printer, which is an excellent printer.
Okay, yeah. we basically, and the folks at Sawgrass we all started with probably the Epson platform, and we've now graduated with the Sublimation R inks to the Ricoh gel printer. It's a printer that's designed for a jelly-like ink rather than a liquid ink, so it's really better accustomed to the kind of dyes that have to be dispersed into the ink, and it really gives you top performance. It's a relatively fast printer as compared to some of the older printers. I think, my memory serves me correctly, it's probably around 23 seconds to do an 8.5 by 11, which is not a very long period of time. We sell a couple different printers that work with the Sublimation R inks. One is the 3110 DN, and the other is the 7700. We're going to talk tonight particularly about the 3110, which is the 8.5 by 11 version of it, the 7700 being the 11 by 17 version. Most people who are doing just mugs and things like iPhone covers and the like are using the 8 by 10 printer very successfully. We package together with the mug press various peripheral printing devices. For example, if you don't have a mug press and you want to get into the business, you will definitely need to have the 3110, because that's the way you're going to print the transfer using the Sublimation R inks. And then the way you're going to apply it is with a mug press. Now, the mug press that we sell, we call a digital mug press. It's primarily because you've got a controller that's digital. It reads the temperatures digitally, your sets digitally. Now, I might add here, we talked a little bit earlier about some of those settings. We have, the mug press that we sell has what's called an idle temperature and an application temperature. The idle temperature means that when the mug press is sitting there all day in between your applications, it's idling. We typically are idling the mug press at about 230 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason why is because we want to get to about 325 to 330 for the application, and we don't want to start from zero because that takes a lot longer. So we idle it at a lesser temperature than the actual application temperature, and the logical reason for this is an engineering one, and that is that the hotter things run all day long, the shorter they last in lifetime. So if we idle at 230, we can bring it to 325 pretty quickly and then apply it there for 40 seconds. So when you look at our instructions on the Giotto website, we will tell you that we want you to idle the mug press at 230 degrees, and that it'll come to 325, and then you're going to apply it for 40 seconds. Now, the total period of time is going to be roughly about that 1 to 3 second time that Jimmy had on the original slide. We're going to be just a little greater than 1, because by the time it comes up to that temperature and that 325 is satisfied, it doesn't start counting the 40 seconds until that point. And so that's kind of our package. We also we put a case of mugs and some printing paper, sublimation printing paper, with each printer package. Now, I have been in the sublimation business probably for about 18 or so years, and I can tell you that in the beginning, everybody used to take whatever the cheapest paper they could get at Staples and print a transfer on it. And then along came a bunch of different products, and the reason they did is because the paper, you want to have an inkjet receiver so that it receives the ink from the printer and that it locks it up really nicely so that it doesn't spread out and fan out and make any kind of a soft image, but you want it to release all the ink as quickly as possible. So you don't want that, you do not want that paper to hold the ink down in its into its fibers. You want it to release it all. So typically we sell the product and we offer it in the case itself. I apologize for the background telephone number, but I am coming to you from an official, I think we're called a decision state or what have you, in Ohio, and I'm being inundated by telephone calls tonight. So, and I got rid of the company phone, I disconnected it, but I'm kind of stuck with the local, with the house phone. So, in any event, these papers will allow the image to be put onto the paper, and then it will release it all. So we package the mug press together with a case of mugs and the paper, together with the printer and the Sublimation R ink. I guess probably one other thing I could add here is people say to me, well, how much ink do I get with my when I get my cartridges or when I get my printer? I can tell you that you're going to require a certain amount of ink to fill up the printer. And roughly speaking, you're probably going to use about half of the cartridges that come with the printer when you charge the printer for the first time. You may have a little more than about 60% left over in terms of the black, but the others are going to be around somewhere between 50 and 60%. So I always recommend to customers that they buy an extra set of ink when they get the printer. They will use it, because if you're buying this to not use it, you better spend your money doing something else. But if you're buying it to use it, and it is a very good product, buy it with an extra set of ink, and that way at like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, when you're trying to satisfy somebody's order and you run out of magenta or yellow, you are covered. You typically won't run out of all the colors at the same time, but they will exhaust. And so you'll be looking at roughly about half the capacity of the cartridge left after you fill up the ink. I guess that's pretty much what I have to say here about that.
Well, Wayne, we got some questions coming in, so we'll just go ahead and take some of the questions.
Okay.
You know, the first one here I have is, can we only sublimate on white mugs? And the answer to that is white is not the only color. Now, that's one of the things you hear with sublimation. You can only sublimate on white. Not true, but sublimation does not offer a white ink option. Therefore, if you're going to sublimate on something darker, you start to lose some of the vibrancy in the color the darker the background is. And once you get into a really dark set, like a black mug, you wouldn't be able to sublimate it. Well, you could. You just wouldn't see it. The other problem is you can't reproduce the color white. So even if you had a light-colored mug, let's say that there was one available as a pink, okay? If you sublimate on there, you couldn't reproduce the color white, so that could be your limitation. Therefore, white is the best color because it gives you the best color vibrancy, and it allows you to leave open in a graphic the areas that need to be white such that the background comes through. Well, reality is, I mean, most of the mugs, you know, for sublimation are pretty much white to begin with, and then we're recoloring the mug, you know, to some degree through the sublimation process.
There are, Jimmy, there are mugs that I've seen, and I don't know if they're still offered now, but I have seen mugs that were dark on the inside of the mug, yep, and they were glazed dark on the outside with a particular white square left open, or a white rectangle left open, in which you would do your sublimation design in that area, so that you would, you know, you'd have an overall dark mug. To me, it's I don't think that it's as nice a gift to get that as it is to get one that covers the entire surface of the mug. And when the image runs off of the surface of the mug, it really it has a lot greater impact, I think, than just those little windows with print on it.
Yep. Okay, got a couple of questions that came in on the equipment you were talking about. Specifically, the first couple of questions are on the Ricoh 3110 printer, and you know, the first question on that, and I know the answer, but I'm going to let you take it, is you know, tell me about the maintenance on these. Do you have to purge the ink through the system periodically to clean the heads, or what do you have to do?
Well, the printer itself has is what we call a smart printer. In fact, as long as you leave it plugged in, it'll decide to clean itself at regular intervals. I don't know what the specific interval is, but it does clean itself. If you're going to shut it down for a long period of time, I would probably have you run out the printer and clean it out. But for the most part, people that are using it in a normal course of business, 50 if you just leave it running, it'll clean itself.
Yeah, that's one of the big advantages on that Ricoh machine. And just like Wayne said, very important, you got to leave it plugged in and turned on. If you unplug it, it can't do its own self-maintenance, and, well, then you have a situation. So I've run into that sometimes with people just, they want to save power. You know, they want to be focused on reducing that power bill and being green, and they turn everything off they're not using, and then, you know, they clear the memory of the machine and it's not taking care of itself. So can't do that.
I can tell you that in the early days of sublimation, with the 1280 Epson printer, you really had to run a nozzle check on that thing with some of the printers because you had to do it daily. You at least had to do it every week. And I'm a perfect example of the guys that forgot about that, because I got one sitting here that's probably, you know, it's worthless because I forgot about running the nozzle check, and then I probably remembered it after about a year and a half, and it doesn't do anything now, I can tell you that. So the fact that the printer is smart and it does go through the cleaning cycle, and I think if you do the economics on it, leaving it on far outweighs anything you're going to save by turning it off.
That's true. Let's see. I think that someone may have missed, you were talking a little bit about transfer paper, and the question is, do you need a special transfer sheet material? The answer being, for sublimation, yes. You have to have sublimation transfer paper, not just transfer paper. And I know Wayne pointed out there's some very unique things about sublimation transfer paper, which sets it apart from standard paper. And then there are other types of transfer papers out there that are designed for other processes. So it's very important that you're using sublimation transfer paper. And this is something that Giotto supplies. And therefore, you know you're going to be getting the right paper. Anything else is just not going to work.
Yeah, I think the real issue is probably much less about the inkjet receiver than it is about releasing it. We actually did a bunch of testing early on, back 15 years ago, and we did photomicrographs of a regular bond sheet of paper and how far down into the paper the ink soaked. And of course, the farther it goes, since you have to, when you apply heat to a sublimation transfer, you in effect cause the ink to boil. And if it's all way down in the paper, it takes it longer to get from the point down in the paper across between the transfer paper and the actual coated surface of the mug or whatever you're transferring, and that will affect your image development. And just like you saw that blowout, it's a similar process, because if you don't have the paper in an intimate contact, or if you have the paper further away than the surface of the intimate surface of the material, of the coated material, that dye will just go out into the air, and it's not going to dye the substrate material that's in the mug. So you know, those are the kind of the trade-offs. But you know, if you use the right paper, you shouldn't have any problem at all.
Now, there's a question here about preheating the mug, and I would not preheat the mug, but by you putting that mug in the press, and it has to ramp up a little bit there on the temperature, and that might be what they're referring to, but that's not really truly a preheating of the mug itself. That's putting it in, and then it ramps up to the proper temperature, correct?
That's correct, Jimmy. Basically, what we've told you is that sublimation is a material that when you expose it to heat, it goes into a vapor, and the minute it gets to its sublimation point, and if you preheat anything, you are going to predispose it toward firing off, and you don't want to preheat the mug, especially before you put the transfer on.
Yes.
And the process of the mug press is strictly related to the fact that we don't want the mug press to idle at the application temperature, because one, it wastes energy, and two, it reduces the lifetime of the actual mug heater itself. So that process where we call its idle temperature is not a preheat process. It's just when you put it into the mug press, the temperature is less. The minute you close the mug press and you make the contact, that's when the press starts dosing in all the electricity to the heating element, and then it brings it up to the 340 degrees, and the minute it reaches that, then it starts counting the temperature.
Okay. Someone's asking about the approximate cost in materials, as in the ink, the transfer paper, and the mug, to be able to sublimate a mug. You have a ballpark figure on that?
Oh, sure I do. I got a bunch of different figures on it. It depends on the printer, but typically you're probably, I mean, I have seen estimates on a 3110, everything from 60 cents to about 80 cents. My personal guess is that for an 8.5 by 11 size area, you're probably talking about 60 to 65 cents worth of ink and paper.
Right.
I've not really done anything in terms of the amortization of the electric or anything like that, because the electric rates vary so much dependent on where you are. But I think you can, you know, if you run one transfer on a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, you can think of probably about a 60 or 65 cent worth of material costs. And I don't know what you see about that at Sawgrass, Jimmy. You may want to add more to that.
Yeah, really, the same thing. If you take an 8-inch by 10-inch area, that's about, depending on the printer, okay, that's somewhere in that 55 to 65 cent range for the paper and the ink by, you know, alone. When you actually look at a mug is not an 8-inch by 10-inch graphic anyway. So you're talking about a graphic that's considerably smaller than 8 by 10, you know, potentially easily half of that, such that you maybe even cut that figure down. And you may be able to actually get two, depending on your printer and the size paper you're using, you may be able to get two transfers per sheet, so that you can actually maximize the paper a little bit more. So I think your numbers, you know, because I like to be conservative on the numbers. I don't like to go the other direction and try to shave it down to, well, you know, if you cut this down to that, you save another penny. You know, I'm like you. I would say if you're looking at 60 to 80 cents, you're probably a good safe range there. What is a typical blank mug cost, or is there a typical cost on a blank mug?
Well, they run all the way from 99 cents to about $1.75, but okay. You know, our mug costs, and while we're talking about mugs, we have two types of mugs. One type of mug is what we call the normal sublimation mug, and it sells in small quantities, case lots. I think we're about $1.10 a mug. We have a product we call the super white pearl coated mug, and we call it a AA++ coating in that it's very, very white, and it gives you a stunning reproduction when the sublimation transfer appears against it. And it's about another 15 cents. I think those mugs are about $1.25 a piece. And I tell customers, like at trade shows, I tell customers, look, if you want to get a real good cost on something, on a mug, I wouldn't think of a mug more than costing you about $2.20 to $2.30, including the mug and everything else you're going to put into it. And I would think that you'd be talking about selling it at least in the $10 range, maybe more. So, you know, you're probably talking about at least $5 to $6.50, $7 worth of gross profit in it. So
yeah, easy. You know, a lot of it has to do with who you're selling it to and what it's all about. You know, when it's a personalized gift, you can get some really nice numbers out of things, especially if you personalize it with someone's picture. You know, when you put
like
their picture on
$25.
Oh yeah, you put their picture on it, it takes it to a whole nother level when you're talking about retail. Yeah. So, you know, people ask me all the time, what do I charge for this or whatever? And I don't have a set answer, because as I've learned, you charge what the market will bear, and every market's a little different, and a lot of that comes from that experimentation. But definitely, you know, it's your marketing skills. It's not a number of, say, 100% markup. You know, you really got to look at the value to that, you know, that customer.
Yeah, I think you're looking at, you know, the reason we put the case there is by the end of the case, your ROI should be good. I mean, you've paid for it. You know, if you can take that case of mugs, you won't goof up too many on the front end.
Right.
If you go and look at the various websites, look at ours, for example. We have a video on there. I think Sawgrass does too as well.
Yes.
If you look at that before you crank everything up, by the time you get done with that case, you should have paid for your investment, quite frankly.
Yep.
And you should have 100% return on it. The only caution that I say to people is that when you go and embark upon this business, you need to be aware of the fact that you need to have the professional version of Microsoft's XP. What was the next one? Whatever that bad one was, and now the 8. I got it over here on a laptop, and
yes, I know.
I have that Vista, Vista Professional.
Yes,
but you do need to have the professional version of the software because that's what all of the software that you're going to download from Sawgrass that makes your printer work and allows you to predict colors and produce good color is going to be geared for that particular pro version. And without it, you won't get support on the software. And I always tell you that Sawgrass has been at this thing a long time. They've done a very good job at it. They know exactly what they're doing. And you don't want to ignore what they can provide you, and that is their partner support. And if you put it on the wrong bloody printer, yeah, it'll probably, or the wrong software, it'll probably work. But, you know, if something does happen, you won't have any way to get support. And so, you know, that's another caution to you. I don't think it's critical, but it is a caution that you need to be aware of.
Yep. And we have a question right along those lines of, can I run this Sawgrass software for making mugs on a Macintosh computer? And what I want to clarify there is there's no software for making mugs. The software that we're talking about is really just a printer driver. And we produce drivers such that it controls the ink as it flows through the system. It manages it so that it can go through properly, and also our drivers have color profiles as well to help you with color matching. And those are free. You download them when you purchase your printer. The Ricoh 3110, by the way, has a Mac profile option as well as a Windows Power Driver option, so you can use that particular printer with either system that you're running.
I'm not sure that it may require an Intel Mac. That's the only thing. I looked that up for someone that I sold a system to the other day, and I think you may have to have an Intel Mac. I don't think it'll run on the PowerPC Mac, but that's something we can clarify for you. But it has to have System 10.5 or better, and I think it wants to see one of the Intel Core 2 Duo or better machines, which are generally the newer machines.
Right. Okay, another question is, and this is another one of those that I don't think has a specific answer, but how many mugs can you make with one ink set approximately?
I sure and heck don't know.
Neither do I, and I get those kind of questions all the time, but you know, the reality is we don't know how big your image is, and you know, you may be using a whole lot of one color versus another color. Such that one cartridge runs out before another. That's normal. You know, one of the other things is if you have really high resolution numbers set with your graphics, you can actually be using more ink than you really need to use. So there's all kinds of variables in there that control how much ink goes through, and therefore it becomes a really wide range of, you know, can I get this many or get that many out there? And there really is no set answer for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's really related to color, and it's not that anybody's trying to avoid it. I had a customer I sold a system 2 years ago, and they called me up after about 2 days and said, "What the hell do you mean you sold me this? I mean, my black ink ran out." I said, "Well, what does your design look like? Send me a copy of it. Send me a JPEG." Well, it was only black ink, you know. That's what it was. Right. It was tight, and it was a body shop, and it was all black. Well, obviously it was gone. I've seen all kinds of estimates running from like 250 to about 325 prints, and that would be roughly an 8.5 or an 8 by 10, 8.5 by 11. So if you translate that, you know, let's make it conservatively. If you say it's 200 and you get 2 out, you got 400. But it's real a crapshoot. It really depends on your the biggest thing is the quality, the resolution that you're set on. And there is I don't know, it's kind of a misconception in the imaging business in general, and that is the T-shirt imaging and the sublimation imaging, that you need to have your printer set like you would if you were going to be producing a brochure for Mercedes-Benz. It does not require that degree of resolution, and all you're doing is pouring a lot of dye into something that you're really going to get no return out of, okay? And, you know, in some cases you fill up, you fill shadow areas that you probably wouldn't have if you'd have been a little lighter with the resolution. So that would be my concern, and that's what I think I can tell you about the number of mugs. The data that we're giving you based on costs are kind of integrated out through a long period of time through a lot of different people who have looked at the costs. And so the cost is probably more important than the actual number of pieces, because yours is going to go up and down based on your image, if it's a full coverage or if it's 25 or 30% ink coverage. But I think you can feel pretty good about the cost numbers themselves.
Yeah, the resolution is such an important aspect because, you know, a lot of people like myself think that if a little is good, a lot must be better, right? So if you had 350 DPI, imagine what you could get if you change it to 700 DPI. Well, the reality is this, especially with sublimation printing, the human eye has a hard time discerning quality changes above about 275 DPI. Right. Now, high imaging is required sometimes on things that, like you were saying with the brochures. But the reality is, you know, we'll tell people, hey, if you shoot for 300, 350 max, you should be able to sublimate just about anything out there and get a really good sublimation. But, you know, beyond that, you're just wasting ink because your printer is putting more ink out, but you can't tell the difference. So do pay attention to your resolution settings. That can make a huge difference in how much ink that you're using.
And I'd say that runs all the way across every kind of any kind of personalization you're going to do. I mean, really, above about 275. Well, I'll tell you, it's very difficult to tell. Now, some people can actually resolve it. You know, guys like Henry Wilhelm who spent his lifetime doing this stuff. But the average person, I got to tell you, after about 250, 275, I can't tell the difference.
Yep. Yeah, I know one of those too who has that eagle eye, but you're right. So people need to pay attention to that. A lot of times they don't, and they have some incredibly high settings because they were working in Photoshop and they used some, you know, standard setting and didn't realize it. And, you know, and that's just their ink is really running out the door there. Okay. Let's look real quick. I know that we looked at this package here. It's been sitting on the screen for a while, and that was a nice printer mug press package setup. But I know from some of the questions that have come in that we have some people who may be looking at a complete system of setup, not just for mugs, but for other things too. So I know that in visiting your website, you had another production package on there that looked pretty interesting, which was a larger scale because you had that same printer, but you had the mug press and you had that flat press. And one of the things I want to say, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, is when you're investing in your heat press, it's so critical that you get a good quality heat press, especially on the flat ones, because if you have inconsistent temperature or inconsistent pressure, you will have inconsistent sublimation all day long. And I've seen people, they run onto eBay and they get these, you know, no-name heat presses made who knows where for $250, and they get horrible sublimation out of it because the press is not capable of delivering, you know. So when I look at your package price here, I mean, that looks like a great package for getting started and a really good price point.
Yeah, that's a Stahl's Hotronic STX clamshell automatic, and this is what you would call the granddaddy of them all. I mean, and I just sold one today that included a cap press too, but typically this will cover you for mugs, water bottles. The flat will give you the ability to do iPad covers, iPhone covers, and a bunch of flat surface things that you can do quite well with sublimation. Plaques. There's a whole line of Unisub items that are basically they're built around flat surfaces so that you can do all kinds of very nice table containers and things of that nature, and you'll need to have a flatbed press for that. To mirror what Jimmy says about the press itself, you want a press that has that's got a cast head on it, and if you have that, and most of the manufacturers, I'd say all the folks that are making the machines here in this country are doing that. They basically take a cow rod, which is kind of like the old stove thing, and they cast it into the head. There are some foreign mug presses, however, that basically they drill a bunch of holes in an aluminum block, and then they put single cow rods in there, and they wire them in parallel. And because it's not an intimate contact with the actual head itself, you will get cold spots in it, and it's terrible for sublimation. It's terrible for color laser copier transfers. It's not very good for your regular plastisol kind of transfers. So if you think through this in the beginning, for the amount of money you're going to save, you're going to be creating a lot of headaches on the other end, and you're going to end up, if you're in business, buying another one. So,
yep.
$2,000 gets you everything you need, and it gets you a good product. It gets you the Stahls press. The Hotronics is a good machine.
Yep. Okay. Well, we've gotten most of our questions taken care of here, so I think we're going to kind of wind down to our exit strategy. And I have put on the screen my email as well as Wayne's email, because we want to encourage you, if you have additional questions, to please contact us. We'll do our best to answer those questions for you, so that you get the information that you're looking for. And I want to thank Wayne and all the folks over there at Giotto Paper for inviting me in to do a little presentation today. I always enjoy getting out and sharing some with people that are looking to learn a little bit more. So Wayne, again, I appreciate being here, and I'm going to turn it back to you for any closing comments you have.
Okay, Jimmy. Thanks very much. We appreciate it. I know I've invited a number of people to the webinar here because if you're like hanging on the balance, everything you can learn is important. I might add the commercial is that Giotto is really a full-line distributor of all kinds of personalization, from sublimation printables, all the way through to color laser copier, color laser transfers, and in fact an awful lot of vinyls that are heat applied. And so while in that we sell all of these things, we look at sublimation as the very important part of our package for hard surface decoration. We have and of course you can sublimate t-shirts, okay? There are shirts that you can sublimate, and they look very nice. But then we have all of the other products in terms of vinyl films that can be cut. We sell the cutters themselves. We even sell wide format eco-solvent to decorate these print and cut films. So we probably have across the large variety of products, and I certainly welcome any any inquiries that people have, and we'll certainly endeavor to answer them. Thanks again, Jimmy, for being with us today. I appreciate it, and I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time out late in the evening or late in the afternoon, as the case may be.
Okay, thanks, Wayne, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, be well. Take care, everyone.
Bye.